A lot of people believe that in order to gain fluency, taking on a big challenge, like literally fluent in another language, that you need to focus. You need a lot of intensity and energy and drive, motivation, all these things that if you can do that over a period of time, let's call it several months, you can gain fluency if you're smart and you have the right ambition. I disagree. I completely disagree. The answer and the only way you can achieve such a seemingly insurmountable goal is slow, consistent, steady practice. My name is Scott Bryan, and I have lived this very experiment. In fact, some 30 plus years ago, I took a little sabbatical before going to graduate school, traveled abroad to Spain, spent 3 months studying and living the language, living with families. I didn't speak a word of English all summer long. I had a wonderful time, albeit a little lonely, because I couldn't communicate. Despite my focused effort and energy, doing everything I could to gain fluency, I just couldn't do it. That period of time is not sufficient to achieve fluency. It just isn't. And it's not today, and it certainly wasn't back then. But the reason why I say that is today we have a lot of technology and tools that assist in the process that we didn't have back then. But even so, it just doesn't work. I mean, you'll learn language. You'll improve. Absolutely. Fluency, it's a different animal. Fluency takes time, and it takes consistent, slow energy. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about why that is. And more importantly, I'm going to share a little more about my personal experience and what I think the right answer is to achieving fluency in regard to the tortoise and the rabbit. Okay, spoiler alert. La tortuga vence al conejo. The tortoise beats the rabbit. And no surprise, I want to spend a few minutes, see if I can explain why I believe it is. And to be clear, I'm talking about fluency, like near native fluency, such that you can do a lot more than communicate, but literally anything that comes in your mind in English, you can have a pretty decent representation of that in Spanish, and it just happens naturally and it flows and you're engaged. That's what I'm talking about here. And the way that I believe you have to do that is just with frequency. Slow, methodical, frequent, focused speaking practice, if you will, right? My methodology is all about practice. It starts with translation practice, ultimately turns into conversation practice, but it's practice. And I do this personally a couple times a day. Ideally, it would happen every hour on the hour so that it's alive. It's one thing to gain the knowledge. We all understand what that means, I think. And it happens in a classroom, it happens online, there's lots of ways that it happens. And you test yourself by taking exams. So you have all of this knowledge, you're acquiring knowledge. And then you have the opportunity to regurgitate that knowledge on a test or show people what you know. And it can be in the form of writing or reading or whatever. But that act, it does require energy and motivation and bursts of focus. And you have the opportunity to pause and recall the knowledge that's in your perhaps longer term memory. But to speak, it needs to be like in the short term memory. It needs to be right at the ends of the neurons, all the words and the structure and the grammar and the pronunciation. It needs to be active and alive and ready at a moment's notice, at a split second to come out. So how do you get there? How does that work? Well, it needs to happen all the time. Your brain needs to be reminded of the fact that it needs to keep this new language at the ready. It can't store it away such that it's going to take some time to recall it. It needs to be available at a moment's notice to come out, and then it does. And again, how do you do that? Short little bursts of focused practice, a couple times a day ideally, over a long period of time. And I'm not talking about 3 months, I'm talking about years, to be honest. And depending upon your level of fluency you wish to attain, Imagine you're trying to gain the level of fluency that we have in our native language. It's years. So sorry to say, I wish it was shorter. I genuinely don't believe there's another way around it. So there you go. That's why I believe the tortoise, la tortuga, vence al conejo en este caso. So what does this look like in my own life and my existence now? Again, as I'm recording this, I'm a year and a half or so into my journey, and it's what I do. And I do believe that if I didn't consistently use the Spanish that I've learned, if I'm not continually speaking the language like a couple of times a day, this very well may fade quickly. I don't know. It's an experiment. I'm a living experiment here. But I can tell you a little bit about what my day looks like and why it works, because I'm testing this all the time and I've had a lot of success. I do it really in 2 sessions. So there's 2 practice pillars that I focus on, and I'll have a link to a document that describes what these practice pillars are. But I think of the path to gaining fluency starts with acquiring the knowledge. It's all the intensity where the rabbit plays hard. Then you have translation practice, conversation practice. This is largely technology-based. It happens by yourself. And then ultimately, pillar number 4 over here is conversation with other people. So I'm playing over here in section 4 to confirm that I do have and continue to maintain this level of fluency. But what I do every day, and I do this on the way to work, when I'm driving to work, I'm translating sentences. Yeah, I have a little habit, and it takes me 15 minutes or so before or after my commute to work, which is I'm translating sentences. I'm hearing a sentence in English, I'm thinking about how I would say that in Spanish, and then I'm saying it. And then I'm comparing that to how a native would say that same phrase in Spanish. But in other words, it's my daily dose, if you will. And it's super easy, fits in my schedule. I don't even think about it. It's like brushing my teeth. I don't lose a minute of my day's productivity by doing this. It's just my little daily habit. It's what I do. I translate a few sentences every day. I probably get through 15 or 20 on the way to work. I might do a few before or after, but it's consistent. And then in the evenings, I take my dogs to the park and I talk to ChatGPT. I speak in Spanish. I have a conversation with a robot, if you can believe it, and it's my daily practice. So I spend another 15, 20 minutes speaking Spanish. So that happens basically twice a day. It ends up being, less than an hour a day. It's coupled with habits that are already part of what I do, so I don't feel like I lose any time in my day, yet it's consistent. And it's what I expect and what I do. Every single night I'm walking my dogs or taking them to the park or doing something, and I bust out the phone and I start talking Spanish. I'm talking to myself in the car on the way to work. It's that simple, but it's that consistency that keeps it alive and fresh and evolving and expanding. And if I didn't do that, I'm convinced this process would not work. So there you go. That's my personal experience in the way that I make it work for me. And now a couple words on why this consistent, repeated practice day after day after day works, and how it helps you achieve what a lot of people think of as completely insurmountable, which is this idea that there's a lot of people that say, hey, look, to become truly fluent in another language, you need to know north of 10,000 words. So how can you possibly do that? Particularly when you think about the fact that, hey, on a good day, I might be learning a word or two. Maybe I'm learning a handful of new words, really, when you think about it, and that is the pace I'm on. And sometimes I wonder, how can I communicate and have the level of fluency I have in the period of time that I've able to achieve it, if in fact we really need 10,000 words? I have no knowledge, by the way, of how many words I know in Spanish. I genuinely do not. I'm not sure even how you would measure that. But I will say that there's this thing also in Spanish you learn about cognates, cognados. Those are words that are roughly the equivalent in English and in Spanish. So they're the same words, essentially, but pronounced differently. And so what I find is as I'm communicating, you're starting to just naturally throw out words that you believe are accurate and are close to being accurate and often are accurate. And then through some back and forth and hearing those words yourself subtly as you're doing this practice, they naturally become part of your vocabulary and knowledge without you even knowing it. This is the value in this idea of consistent repetition. And as you do it, it becomes so natural. It becomes part and parcel with how you communicate. If you do it every day consistently, then you stop thinking about it and it just starts to happen. And it's a beautiful thing when it happens, but again, it doesn't happen overnight. So in conclusion, I would simply say that, look, intensity has its place, all that drive and energy and motivation. That's how you learn the language. That's how you get motivated to get there. And again, that's all the rules, how the language works. And you show that via examinations, you regurgitate, you have time to pause, recall that information, express it. Speaking is a whole different animal. It just needs to happen automatically. You open your mouth and it comes out. The only way that happens is when you're speaking all the time. And the more the better, right? And I'm a very practical person. Look, I'm not moving to Spain and living there for years on end to gain fluency. I have figured out a way to do this where I can weave it into my day, where I'm doing it a couple times and it has no impact on what I'm able to accomplish in a day, yet I'm speaking another language, and it keeps it alive. And you know, a good, consistent habit like that, it's not only enjoyable, it's relaxing, it's different, it's unique, but it allows, I believe it's what makes fluency possible. So again, I hope this has been of assistance to you in thinking about how you go about tackling this very seemingly insurmountable but joyous goal. Thank you.